Hello there, so I created and ranked a taiko map. This video explains the learning process from the perspective of a standard Osu mapper, in 3 parts. Let's get started. Part 1. Mapping. For explanation's sake, you'll need to know what taiko generally is. One of Osu's game modes played on a horizontal scroll bar, mainly featuring circles of 2 colors that are clicked with different keys. If that's everything you know about taiko, don't worry, because prior to August 28th, I was in the same boat. I've never seriously mapped taiko before. I've never played it even, but I mean, who's to say you need experience playing to know how to create a map? There's plenty of standard mappers who have little time played, and there's no correlation between a user's global rank and the difficulty of their maps. So I chose a song from my library, converted the mode to taiko, and began mapping. Which I believed I was doing well at first. The editor is no different from standard, except that circle positions on the playfield are irrelevant. The timeline is all that carries over into gameplay, so it felt like I was just establishing rhythm for a circle-only map. Although that in itself wasn't exactly easy. Lacking sliders means emphasizing or contrasting sounds in the music is challenging, and that's even more troublesome without cursor movement to compensate. Taiko has its own mode-specific ways of dealing with these issues though: color and size. By default, all notes are red, but applying clap or whistle hit sounds makes them blue, and adding a finish makes them big notes. When first mapping, I made some assumptions about these. First, bigger notes equate to more emphasis. Makes sense, you click them with 2 buttons. And second, colors were used for contrast, like showing different parts of the music. That being said, I used big notes for every cymbal crash or otherwise important sound in the song, and chose colors according to musical instruments. Blue represented the melody of a song, while red represented most drums. I eventually learned that this was a crude and incorrect way of thinking, but we'll get to that later. Overmapping is another rhythm tool for emphasis, and being a mode of entirely rhythm, I assumed it would be applicable here too. Just how in standard Osu, an overmap triple can be used to emphasize the sound it leads into, I assumed I could emphasize sounds in taiko, and was more or less reassured of that when reading the mode's ranking criteria. I had this page open the entire time I was mapping pretty much, since it showed me a lot of differences between taiko and the mode I'm used to. For example, overmapping, called improvisation here, comes across as an established part of the game mode, and so it seemed valid to utilize. The last point I have to make about my initial mapping impressions here is the speed. Taiko mapping is so fast that it feels like I'm cheating or something. Even while having to learn along the way, I made this at 4-minute insane difficulty in a bit over an hour. For comparison, I tried speed mapping, basically mapping as fast as I could, a couple months back and managed a TV-sized map in about an hour. That's with the experience of having made 100 maps in that game mode already. Then tacked on to that, every subsequent difficulty of my taiko set was just a matter of duplicating a higher difficulty and removing/adjusting notes. That means they were even faster. So that's that. I made a map set. I knew it had to have problems of some kind, but I couldn't recognize them, and deep down I felt like there was a chance for a miracle, a chance that I'd created something actually good thanks to my knowledge of normal Osu and taiko's rhythm-based simplicity. But, you know, ignorance is bliss and all that. Part 2. Modding. The new mapper experience is something I've previously claimed not to know anymore. Like, as of now, I've been a mapper for long enough that I can't relate to a day 1 mapper learning to map and trying to improve. Through mapping a different mode though, I've been able to more or less relive that experience, but not so much through the literal mapping part. Mapping for me here was just like throwing some objects on screen and hoping they were good. Improving relies on constructive mapping feedback, also known as modding, and the mods I received showed me I didn't understand anything. It's hard to explain, but I actually mean 2 things by that. First is more literal, I just didn't know how to effectively map taiko. For example, the colors of notes aren't exactly meant to contrast layers in the music. They're rather used for contrasting pitches, like musical pitches. Relatively higher pitched sounds are blue and lower pitches are red. Which, after listening to hit sounds in gameplay, makes a lot of sense, but isn't labeled anywhere on the ranking criteria, so I didn't know. After a modder spammed my map set with change red to blue to fit pitches, I caught on to that and ended up redoing all color choices. Similarly, I was clueless when it came to map set spreads. To me, all that matters is that no difficulties have too wide of a gap. That's why there's lots of map sets with, say, 3 insane difficulties. This doesn't form a linear difficulty curve, but it works because there's no huge spikes. In taiko, however, people treat difficulty curves like they need to be linear. Every difficulty is compared to one another in terms of gameplay elements, and in terms of color usage, and even down to how many objects they have, which seems kind of silly to me, but apparently this idea was necessary to adhere to if I wanted to rank the map. What these and more issues showed me was that Taiko has its own distinct mapping norms, and to create something rankable, those norms need to be followed in some capacity. Even if the circle color choices I had before made sense, they went against the pitch-based format all other Taiko maps use, and so I ended up changing them. That might sound a bit submissive, like why should I change it if it makes sense, but I wasn't trying to revolutionize Taiko with my first map. I just wanted to know how the mode worked, so fighting for my instinctual mapping style wasn't going to help. The second thing I meant by I didn't understand anything is a bit harder to grasp. When addressing mods, which were intended to improve my map, I didn't really know if they were an improvement. Variety is the best example for this. In mapping, variety is the way maps are kept interesting. People follow the music more liberally than a one-to-one replica of a song. For example, this and this are both valid ways to express this part of the music, and so if the song repeats itself, interchanging the two rhythms would make a map less repetitive and therefore more engaging. Taiko doesn't have any factors like passive rhythm or object placement that allow expression of the same idea in multiple ways though. That's why I had a lot of trouble handling mods that told me to spice things up through variety. When I did that through adjusting note colors or rhythms, someone else would inevitably come and tell me how the variety I used misrepresents the song. Then I would change it back and someone else would tell me how repetitive the map is. Sometimes there's no correct choice in mapping. I'm aware of that, but it feels like the problem with being a new mapper is not knowing where to draw the line. Normally I'd be able to judge for myself whether variety was well implemented or not, but without fully understanding Taiko's mapping conventions, I had to rely on other people to evaluate, and that made it feel like I wasn't improving. But despite playing the role of a submissive mapper here, there were some Taiko mapping conventions I really didn't want to follow. Like my map slider velocity was 1.399, 9999, etc. The ranking criteria says to use 1.4. There is no way to tell the difference, but people were weirdly persistent about it, so I ended up changing it. Maybe that persistence was good though. As the modder says, this was caused by a bug that multiplies slider velocity. I don't know how true that is, but I did encounter a possibly related bug multiple times. When opening AI mod, the editor's built-in problem checker, slider velocity would multiply by 1.4. This was really inconvenient and possibly caused these weird decimals, so I reported it and it was fixed. Thank NyQuil for that one. Part 3. Ranking. Remember how I said I felt like I was in the shoes of a new mapper again? Trying to rank this map made me feel that most strongly. In the same way how I didn't know if changes were improving the map or not, I had no idea whether my map was good enough to be ranked. That's something that takes ranking a few maps to truly realize, and so I wasn't very comfortable asking beatmap nominators if my map was ready. And in the same vein, I personally cut off my normal avenues of finding BNs. Mod for mod exchanges are how I get mods. I open my queue, tell the world, mod my map, then I'll mod yours, and once I'm done, I do the same with beatmap nominators. When scrolling through mod queues, I noticed a couple times when Taiko nominators were offering mod for mod, but I couldn't bring myself to take the offer. Knowing I wouldn't be very helpful, or at least not to the extent of modding regular Osu, makes it feel like an unfair exchange. In the end, I did rank my map, but not in the way a new mapper would. The first nominator I got told me the map was acceptable and straight up offered to check it, which would never happen to an unknown mapper, and the second was a result of a mod for mod arrangement where I modded the BN's standard Osu map. So maybe I didn't get the true new mapper experience, but it worked out in the end, so I really shouldn't be complaining. Conclusive thoughts on mapping Taiko: it isn't so different from what I'm used to in standard Osu. Maybe the conventional techniques are new, but their existence is something I came to expect, and given how both are rhythm games that use the same editor, it's not all that unfamiliar. Similarly, the modding and ranking sides of Taiko were more or less what I went through already, but again, with a new set of norms as obstacles. I imagine if I were to map for another mode, or even for another rhythm game, a lot of what I learned from ordinary Osu mapping would still apply. Still though, despite ranking a Taiko map, I don't feel like I know how to map Taiko. Much of it is still too vague and unnatural for me to do consistently, and I feel like I won't know what makes a Taiko map good until I receive feedback on more maps. That's telling of something though. Regardless of what game mode, ranking shouldn't be the end goal of mapping. New mappers strive for rank because players mainly play ranked maps, but believing that's the most you can get out of mapping is a naive way of looking at it. At least, that's what mapping Taiko helped me see. Anyway, that's that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.